the first pope from Latin America, the first Jesuit pope, the first pope to call himself Francis, the first pope who refused to be called pope, but simply Bishop of Rome, at least for the first few months of his pontificate. This is the election of Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, and I am doing a review of this book by Gerard O'Connell of the election of Jorge Bergoglio, aka Jorge the Humble One Bergoglio, Jorge the first merciful pope in history, Francis. Welcome, Catholicos, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, all who seek the truth. Now, this book is actually really, even though it's how many years now since Jorge was elected, this just got published in 2019, I believe. So it's a very, very, very new book. Yep, 2019, or copyright 2019. It is really valuable. It is written in a style of it's a reporter, so Gerard O'Connell, and his wife, Elisabetta Piquet, I think her last name is. They're big Bergoglio fans, and they knew him in Argentina, so he is a friend of the family, so to speak. And so if you can brace yourself for the style of being that Francis, Jorge is a saint like St. Francis. It's the chosen of God. He is the reformer of the church and all that. And he's a man of dialogue and open to the world and all that, you know, he is a saint walking amongst us. If you can stomach that part for a bit, the rest of it is actually very, very interesting and very, very good. And because it is written in a style of like it's almost not a TV show, but it's like happening now. So it's like, okay, today is the say February so and so. Benedict resigns, and this newspaper. This is a report from this newspaper. This broadcast is reporting that, and this reporter is reporting this, and this official is saying that, and this cardinal is mentioning this, and then the next day, boom, this is what happened. Lombardy is declaring so. And so it is like happening day by day, and it is accumulating the reports from cardinals, priests, officials, reporters, newspapers, magazines, television stations, and how their different points of view of what's happening at that instant of time. So in that sense, it is very it puts you in the almost the scene day by day and how things are ramping up and what cardinals are saying and what cardinals or priests are thinking and what media out and the papal rankings. Who's probably going to be Pope Scola or Ule from Canada or Scherer from Brazil or what's the rankings. And that's how it starts, how it is the whole book, really. So it is, the title of the book in total is The Election of Pope Francis, an inside account of the conclave that changed history. So now if we're talking just simply as it's another pope, why would it change history? Because Francis is a different type of pope. So the conclave that changed history. So again, this is the cover of the book. And it is divided into 4 sections, 3 parts. Let me see, 2 or 3 parts. It is divided into 4, as I said, four parts. So the first part is from the announcement of the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI. So that's the part which tracks every single day what's going on between February 11th and February 28th, 2013. And then the second part is the See of Peter is vacant, Sede Vacante. So it is from March 1st to March 11th, 2013. That's part 2. Part 3 is the Conclave, is where the cardinals go into the Sistine Chapel and they go through the election process of the Pope. So that takes 2 days, March 12th and 13th. And then the final part, part 4, is called Early Signs of a New Style of Papacy. That's part 4. And conclusion. So I will go through some of the what's written and what I find interesting. I went through the whole book, and it did take me a while to read because it kind of gets, honestly, a bit tiring because you're going through, it's like almost reading newspaper clips from different reporters and different, and this person said that, and that person this thing, and this person met here, and this cardinal will gather these cardinals, and it's hard to read in a long stretch. So it took me a while to read the whole thing, and I did mark it up a lot with my usual highlighter. So as an example, I don't know if you can see that, but anyways, I highlighted quite a bit. So I'll try to avoid talking too much. I put some with an extra little red arrow there, which I will hopefully remember to mention, because otherwise it'll take me hours just going through the whole book. And even though I don't like his worship of Francis, basically as the coming of Saint Francis of Assisi, as the hermit from the desert amongst us, as the reformer pope who is going to bring everything to renew the church. Anyways, if you can ignore that annoying part, you'll get some valuable information out of it. So I will just kind of go through quickly here. He says, oh, again, that's part from the introduction, from the preface, actually. He says here, I continued my research these past 5, let's ignore that. What happened in the 30 days between the two revolutionary events in the Roman Catholic Church in 2013. The resignation of Benedict being a revolutionary act, and number 2, the election of Francis. Why would the election of Francis be a revolutionary act? We're just electing a pope, aren't we? Apparently not. So anyways, so that's what he says. Page, still in the introduction section. So he says here, the explosive documentation. So this one, he goes through the various reasons. Why did Pope Benedict resign? So he gives the various crises that happened throughout his pontificate. Sexual abuse, even though Benedict actually removed like 800-900 priests from the ministry, way more than Francis ever did, and he was quite strong in that position. But anyways, he goes through different crises which happened, and I have here a quote from him. He says, again, there was and the Vatican leaks which these private documents which were given to Pope Benedict, and his personal secretary or his butler, I think, exposed them, gave them to a newspaper, and which was called the Vati Leaks scandal. In it, these documents, says here, the explosive documentation included letters from the number 2 official in the governorate of the Vatican city-state. And here's somebody we're very familiar with, Archbishop Carlos Maria Vigano, to Benedict XVI and Cardinal Tercisio Bertone. So, and in it, his Secretary of State, denouncing, Vigano, even back then, denouncing corruption, malpractice, internal fighting, and internal opposition he encountered when he tried to clean things up. So from back then, Vigano was still Vigano. He wanted to clear corruption, exposing errors, exposing cliques, and so forth. And so he's talking about the Vatican leaks, and as well that these documents revealed, as the La Repubblica exposed, uh, in an article they published, it's called Sex and Career, the blackmails in the Vatican behind Benedict XVI's resignation. The report revealed the existence of lobbies in the Vatican, including a gay lobby. Um, and here part of the, and still we're still in introduction, says 5 decades or so, again, about the different crises which were happening, which people are speculating caused Benedict to resign. And one of these was it says, the loss of faith in Europe. It says here, 5 decades earlier, so 5 decades earlier, so around 1960, around 1960, 63. 5 decades earlier, Europe had been sending missionaries all over the world. But in 2013, of course, things have completely changed. What happened 5 decades earlier? Vatican II, the opening to the world, the destruction of the liturgy, the destruction of doctrine. They're no longer preaching the one and only true faith, and that the Catholic Church is the one and only true church. Even though it's in the documents of Vatican II, but the Spirit took over the letter. That's what happened. 50 years ago, Europe was still sending missionaries. 50 years later, the faith is virtually eliminated in Europe. And people still can't get it. And now they get a pope who is going to implement Vatican II even more, going off the cliff, following the revolution to the end, as Antonio Socci says. Let's see what here it says. Oh, at the same time, cardinals, again, part of the crisis, cardinals were aware that the Catholic Church in Latin America was also in crisis in several countries, as many faithful were abandoning Catholicism and moving to the evangelical or Pentecostal churches. Because these people were still talking about the scripture being divine, that it's the word of God, and the Catholic Church apparently was saying the exact opposite, even though officially the church still teaches as she must, even as Vatican II states, that the scriptures are the very words of God, that they are inerrant and inspired. And it gives an example of Brazil, that in 1940, 95% of the population was Catholic. In 91, it was 74%. So after Vatican II, again, it started to decline. And then by 2005, only 67% were Catholic. From 95 to 67 in 2005. Now it's even worse. I would bet it's probably close to like 50% or 55%. So we have 40% decline of people being called Catholic. And those who are still called Catholic are amalgamating Catholicism with paganism and these Afro religions in Brazil. All right, so again, he goes through some of the crises, and he says, look, they want as well, the cardinals are saying, we need somebody, a pope, who can reach out to Beijing, to China, and obtain an accord with the Chinese authorities, which of course Francis did, which was, as Cardinal Zen from Hong Kong said, was a betrayal of the true Catholic Church in China. It was a betrayal of true Catholics in China, betraying them to the atheistic communist government of China. And what happened after the accord which Francis signed? The Chinese government went actually increased the persecution of Christians, of Catholics, demolishing shrines and churches. And so that is the fruit of talking to those who hate God and giving in to them. And kind of a joke, he says, oh, the cardinals agreed all cardinals agreed that evangelization was an absolute priority. What a joke. Since, of course, watch my video on Francis evangelization versus proselytism. And that's not true evangelization. It's fake evangelization, which led to the destruction of faith in Latin America and Europe. Not count, of course, the destruction of the liturgy, which was done in the name of reducing the obstacles to our separated brethren. We will destroy our own worship. We will destroy our own apostolic heritage, that you people who reject apostolic heritage and apostolic teaching and apostolic doctrine might like us and maybe join our church, which of course had the exact same, the opposite effect of Catholics leaving the Catholic Church and joining heretical sects. All right, let's see here. It says Benedict XVI was very much admired by the Russian Orthodox. It's true, especially because he was restoring the liturgy, restoring apostolic tradition, not teaching novelties. He says about the media, we're still in the introduction, he says the media that the media came to report on the conclave, but in this book, as this book demonstrates, they also to some degree influenced its outcome. So the media influenced the outcome of the conclave. All right, so we're going to start with part 1. Here we go, part 1. So from the announcement of Benedict's resignation, from the announcement to the resignation of Benedict XVI, so February 11th to February 28th. All right, so let's I'll try to go a bit faster so it's not going to be too long. He says, oh, Benedict decided to resign from the papacy. Did he, or did he just resign from the active exercise of the patron ministry and not from the office, the munus, as Violi and Gonswine himself says? Or did he even try to expand the patron ministry into a contemplative and an active part, changing the definition of the office of Peter? Well, watch my video on Antonio Socci's talking about that, and the other one with Cardinal Burke discussing it. And he says he wrote his resignation in Latin to avoid any misinterpretation of such an important matter. And there are actually people, and that is why he actually did not use the word munus, office, but ministerio, ministry. And in his talk later on in the same year, he talks about leaving the active exercise of the ministry, that he gave away, he no longer had the power of governance. But he says that the office he received in 2005 from the cardinals, he said this was always and forever. And what he did, his resignation, did not annul it, or did not, basically to that effect, did not, annul his acceptance of that office. So how is this possible? Watch my video with Cardinal Burke discussing Pope Francis, and in it I have the quote and I highlighted exactly what Benedict said. So let's continue a bit further. I'm going to try to speed it up because otherwise it will be too long. And then he talks about the day of the announcement of resignation of Benedict XVI. Cardinal Angelo Sodano, Dean of the College of Cardinals, said, and I'm reading just off this book here, says, that the news had flared like lightning in a calm sky. And that's what Cardinal Sodano says, that the news of Benedict's resignation was like lightning from a calm sky. And that same day, a few hours later, lightning struck St. Peter's Dome. Not once, but twice. Just after the Pope said that I'm reading Benedict's resignation, saying does not have the adequate, his powers are no longer suited to an adequate exercise of the patrine ministry. But he never says I resign the office per Canon 332, Section 2. Anyway, so let's continue here a bit faster. Talks about Lombardy and Celestine. Monsignor Gonswine, what does he say here about him? Again, part of the resignation, he says, soon after he had finally made up his mind, Benedict confided to his decision to resign, to resign the active exercise of the Petrine ministry, first to Georg, his elder brother, and then an only surviving sibling, and later to his private secretary, Monsignor Georg Gonswine, who was just put on leave by Francis. Gonswine in 2016 in a lecture stated that Benedict wanted to expand the Petrine ministry, so he expanded it into a contemplative and an active part. That he did not, that he there must still be called holiness and pope, and that's why he wears white. And then he says that Benedict did not abandon the office of Peter. So if he did not abandon the office, but he abandoned the active exercise of the ministry, and he expanded the ministry. Very confusing times, very weird things, because if you don't abandon the office, you don't abandon the papacy, period. I mean, you can't say, well, I'm abandoning just these powers, but I'm going to remain pope, but not the pope, but just, a retired pope, but I'm still pope. You can't be still pope. Anyways, it's very confusing. And he says here again, after Benedict read his resignation announcement, he said, Benedict imparted his blessing and then simply walked out of the hall and head bowed. So he's walking, his head bowed. 4 years later, Monsignor Alfred Suereb revealed in a talk that when Benedict returned to his study, he broke down and cried. So Benedict, after he resigned, went back to his study with his head down. As soon as he walked in, he bowed down and cried. No, I cried. Honestly, I did cry. All right, let's see here. I'm going to try to skip some thoughts. Here's again. News of Benedict's resignation hit the Catholic Church and the Vatican like a thunderbolt. By an extraordinary coincidence, there are no such thing as a coincidence. All the people, always God brings us signs. Nothing happens by accident. By an extraordinary, which means it's not an ordinary coincidence, or it's not a coincidence, which some interpreted as a mysterious sign, God's anger and wrath. Lightning struck the dome of St. Peter's twice, not once, twice, accompanied by thunder on that cold and icy night after Benedict had announced his resignation. And scripture says in 2 Corinthians 13 verse 1, every matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. And God gave you his testimony, not one lightning strike, 2 witnesses hitting the dome of St. Peter the very day, few hours after Benedict resigned his active exercise of the Petrine ministry. Shows you what God thought. And later on in the book, where they're talking about the conclave, just before entering into the conclave, they had a huge mass where all the cardinals participated, and then they walked in procession into the Sistine Chapel for the conclave. And at that mass, thunder, lightning, storms, and rain was happening while the cardinals were celebrating Mass to go and elect a new pope. Shows you God strikes St. Peter's twice with lightning and thunder. And then the day of the conclave, they're celebrating Mass before going into the conclave in the Sistine Chapel. Thunder and wind and storms are happening. And it shook, the thunder was strong. What more do you need from God? Like, do you want to like hear his voice yelling and screaming at you? It's like, stop this nonsense. All right, so the more progressive bloc too were thinking about the papal succession, especially the Sankt Gallen group of European cardinals and bishops, which met periodically from 1995 to 2006, and they continued to meet later on, because they are mentioned by Cardinal Daniels himself, that they formed a kind of a mafia. That's the word he used, a mafia, to help Bergoglio get elected. And here he says the Sankt Gallen group included at various times Cardinal Gottfried Daniels from Belgium, Karl Lehmann from Germany, and Walter Kasper, both Germany, Jose de Cruz Policarpo, Portugal, Basil Hume of England, Cormac Murphy O'Connor of the UK, which I did a review of the book of how the British and Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor helped strategize and get Bergoglio elected. Carlo Maria Martini, a Jesuit hater of Benedict XVI, Silvestrini, another Italian, who saw it from the Ukraine, and several bishops from Holland and Belgium. Carlo Maria Martini was one of the first qualified to succeed John Paul II. They wanted him, but because he was too old by Benedict's resignation, they went for Bergoglio instead. One of the names being mentioned everywhere as Papabile was that of Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio. At the end of the conclave meeting, Cardinal Silvestrini, in Cardinal Silvestrini's apartment, the cardinals linked to the Sankt Gallen group and others concluded that Bergoglio was the candidate best suited to be the next pope. So I'm gonna let it go a bit further because, yeah, I mean, I can, even with the brief highlights I have, I could just talk for, it's already half an hour gone, so I'm gonna just skip a lot of it. But as I said, it's very, very interesting, and it goes from cardinal to bishop to priest to various newspapers and what they were saying. And of course, their constant insistence, because he's harping, even though he says about how the St. Gallen was influential, Austin Ivory had a book about how they basically conspired to get Bergoglio elected. So he contradicts himself. He says there, and then he says, "Oh no, this is they actually followed all the rules of the conclave. They didn't do anything." And then he as well insists on that the resignation of Benedict was valid, because he knows there are people who claim, like Antonio Socci, who say, no, first of all, the election conclave, there was a mishap in the counting of the ballots, and the other thing is Benedict didn't seem to want to resign, really. He's still wearing white and still calls himself Pope. So again, they're talking about, oh yeah, Canon 332 was followed to the letter. Did it? And then he has as an Italian writer quoted an anonymous cardinal as saying 4 years of Bergoglio would be enough to change things. Some other cardinal later on, he quotes him as saying to change everything. And I guess they're, oh, here's again, says Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, as he is popular, Cardinal Cormac, as he is popular known, may not be an elector at this conclave, but given his network of contacts in the Vatican and worldwide, he could be one of the kingmakers, and he was one of the kingmakers, as detailed in the book The Keys and the Kingdom, which I reviewed, I believe. All right, let's continue here. February 26, Emeritus Pope will wear white. So again, he goes through the announcement of Father Lombardi announces, because there was discussion, what is Benedict going to call himself? Is he going to go be cardinal again? Bishop Emeritus of Rome? Like, what is he going to be? So Father Lombardi declared that he will still be called His Holiness. He says, moreover, he will continue to be known as Pope Benedict and addressed as His Holiness. And after his resignation, he will be referred to in two acceptable ways. The only two acceptable ways to refer to Benedict are Pope Emeritus or Roman Pontiff Emeritus. And there's later on, he says that actually Pope Benedict did actually, his papal ring was destroyed and papal stamp were destroyed. So the ring we see on Pope Benedict's hand is his ring which he had as cardinal, according to Lombardi. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it says here. And then he has the speech of which I quote about Benedict, so I'm going to skip that. And Benedict himself says, look, he says, I have taken this step with full awareness of its gravity and its novelty. If popes resigned in the past, what makes it so novel? What's novel about it is the popes in the past who resigned became back to cardinals, went back to becoming a hermit or a cardinal. They never remained as Pope Emeritus, never. So that's the novelty here he's talking about. So, there's a nice little incident about what happened when Jorge Bergoglio arrived from Argentina in the airport. He says when he arrived, he says here, he arrived in Rome wearing, as usual, a simple black clergyman suit. He was not wearing his pectoral cross and chain, as most cardinals and bishops do. Indeed, there was no visible sign that he was a prelate, except for the ring in his finger. So we can see from the very beginning, he doesn't want to show that he's a bishop even. I'm hiding it. There he happened to meet, so Jorge met at the airport our Tagle, the Filipino cardinal, who Francis just appointed as prefect for the congregation for the evangelization of peoples. We can guess what kind of evangelization that is going to be. And Tagle have him on video, like he's wearing his like Hawaiian shirt and singing and dancing with people and doing his like sign like that. Anyways, he sees Tagle, and what is it? He says the Filipino was wearing jeans and a barong, which is the traditional shirt that is considered a national dress of the Filipinos. He too gave no sign of being a cardinal, not even a priest for that matter. If he's wearing jeans and his like little Filipino shirt, you don't even look like some Filipino guy coming to Rome. You don't even look like a priest. And he is now the head of the evangelization of peoples. You know, very kind of depressing, but what am I going to say? Okay, now let's go to part 2. The See of Peter is vacant. Is it? I don't know. Isn't Benedict still called Pope? So how can it be vacant? But let's play along. The See of Peter is vacant, March 1st to March 11th. So again, as I said, it's really kind of step by step, and you see the cardinals and the priests and what they're saying, and what the newspapers, this magazine and this thing from Argentina, newspaper in Argentina said that, and this newspaper in Germany said this, and so forth, and what he says, and his appearances on CTV News, and what, you know, his predictions, and so forth. Okay, that's, I mean, a lot of things are kind of, I would love to talk a bit more about them, but that would be just way too long. And, let's see here. Oh, I got to read this one in full. A bit of a couple of paragraphs, and this one is from Cardinal Walter Casper, the friendly ghost. The Hereticus Germanicus, the heretic of the German heretic. He was always in conflict with Benedict XVI and John Paul II, and for some reason they keep him around. And then Francis loves Walter Casper, read his book on mercy, and he calls Walter Casper, oh, you know, he's truly a great theologian, a very good theologian. He's, you know, he does theology on his knees. I love Walter Casper. And basically, I'm going to read you this little section. Walter Casper wrote an article for the New York Times in September 15th, September 24th, 2005. So I'm going to just read it here. During describing the Roman, again, I'm going to reading off the book. So during describing the Roman Curia as a product of the 11th century, he denounced it as the chief obstacle to any thorough reform of the Catholic Church, to any honest ecumenical understanding with the other Christian churches. Again, if they don't have a priesthood, deacons, priests, or bishops, they're not called churches, as the Vatican itself declares. So, but of course, he doesn't care because we're all churches, because he doesn't really truly believe as a Catholic believes. So, and I'm not going to interrupt myself. I'm going to read the whole paragraph again. So he wants to get rid of the Roman Curia or reform it completely, because it's the chief obstacle to any thorough reform of the Catholic Church, they are opponents to any honest ecumenical understanding with the other Christian churches and world religions, or to any critical constructive attitude toward the modern world. And he says, might the next Pope, despite everything, inaugurate a new spring for the Catholic Church? Yes, I guess like the Arab Spring, which caused a lot of disasters for a lot of Middle Eastern countries. So in September 24th, 2005, Walter Casper wrote in the New York Times the following: in this dramatic situation, the Church needs a pope who's not living intellectually in the Middle Ages, meaning being a Catholic, who doesn't champion any kind of medieval theology, meaning Catholic, liturgy, meaning Catholic, or church constitution, meaning Catholic. So that's the kind of pope he wants, an anti-Catholic. According to Professor Kung, the church, again, I'm quoting him, needs a pope who is open to the concerns of the Reformation, to heresy, to modernism, a pope who stands up for the freedom of the church in the world, not just by giving sermons, but by fighting with words and deeds for freedom and human rights within the church. Freedom within the church, meaning freedom to not believe, I guess, and freedom for theologians, for women, freedom for women, like were women enslaved in the church, for all Catholics who want to speak the truth, according to him, even though they don't believe in truth. The concept of truth is unknown to these people. Openly, a pope who no longer forces the bishops to toe a reactionary party line, who puts into practice an appropriate democracy. The church is not a democracy, it's a monarchy. It's the kingdom of Christ. So if it's the kingdom of Christ, Christ is the king, therefore it's the kingdom. The Pope is the vicar of the king, and the bishops are basically the princes or lords of their smaller principalities in the church, because they govern the kingdom of Christ, the people of his flock, and the one shepherd. So democracy, one shaped on the model of primitive Christianity. Do you know what primitive Christianity is? Read Ignatius of Antioch. Read the earliest fathers of the church, the apostolic fathers. it was not a democracy. The bishop is the leader of the church. He is the Christ of the local church. And all looked upon the Bishop of Rome as the head, the source of unity for the entire church. A pope who doesn't let himself be influenced by a Vatican-based, okay, now this is an attack on Benedict XVI from Walter Casper, Pope Francis's favorite theologian. A pope who doesn't let himself be influenced by a Vatican-based, in quotation marks, shadow pope, like Benedict and his loyal followers. And I just read an article now that Francis removed Gonswine as from the head of the papal household. The article in La Croix magazine, La Croix magazine, French magazine, he says about removing the shadow pope. So they use the words of Walter Casper, who attacked Benedict as a shadow pope and his loyalists. So, and that happened, and it exploded with the book on celibacy and priesthood, which was written by Cardinal Sarah and the shadow pope Benedict XVI. And this is another, we're still in the See if Peter is Vacant. This is just an incident happened in again, after John Paul, after John the 23rd died. Of course, there was a papal conclave. So October 1970, John Paul I died. So October 1978, when the Italian Cardinal Giuseppe Siri, one of the conservatives, real Catholics, so there was an interview. He was showing that sometimes when cardinals speak too much, their election status decreases. So what did Cardinal Siri say? And he participated at Vatican II. He was then widely considered a front runner. So he was considered a front runner. So if he shut up, things would have been so good, been reversed and restored to sanity. But he said what was on his mind, which led to his downfall, unfortunately. So he was widely considered as the front runner to succeed John Paul I. The Italian press were confidently claiming that he had 50 votes before the conclave even started. He agreed to give an interview on Friday, October 13th to a magazine. Listen to this. He said, he spoke freely and expressed his very conservative views, which means Catholic views, Christian views. We are supposed to conserve the faith. We conserve tradition. We conserve the deposit of faith and the doctrine of the church. We're not to be innovators in liturgy, in doctrine, or in practice. So he says, he expressed his very conservative views. He claimed it would take 50, so that's 1978. So, and that was just barely after Vatican II. So what, 15, 16 years after the close of Vatican II, he says, so Cardinal Siri said it would take 50 or more years for the Catholic Church to recover from the pontificate of John the 23rd. And he indicated his intention to roll back many of the new initiatives that had flowed from the Second Vatican Council. That would have been a great pope to have, and we would not be suffering the debacle we're in, and the faith would have been restored and strengthened. And those who wanted to go into schism, and who wanted to abandon the faith, let them do so openly. It is better to be open and leave the truth than to be hiding like a virus within the body of the church. And he quotes here, says, Cardinal telas for topo, and he says that this cardinal, he says, on the record, he told me that like all foreign cardinals, he was trying to figure out the true reason for Benedict's resignation. So even this cardinal and all foreign cardinals didn't believe the official reason of Benedict, that, I'm getting too old, I can't go to Brazil for the World Youth Day, and I can't do it. That's not a reason. They wanted to know the true reason. And then another father. Oh, and then they had now where they're getting ready for the conclave. So Father Canta La Mesa, which I don't like because he's very. I heard a lot of his speeches, read a lot of his speeches in years past, and he's basically a Protestant dressed up as a monk. And he delivered. He's a Franciscan preacher of the pontifical household. Delivered the first meditation to the beginning of the general congregations. The general congregations where the cardinals meet. And what did he say? He raised two important issues that he believed the cardinals should address in the meetings. The opening of communion for the divorced and remarried, and the question of the ordination of mature married men to the priesthood. We had Amoris Laetitia, which basically allowed communion allowed the eating and drinking of judgment upon people's selves by telling them, come, you are in objective mortal sin, come and eat the body of Christ, come and drink the sacred blood, and come, as St. Paul tells you, eat and drink judgment on yourself, so you do that you may be sick and physically and of course spiritually die. Amoris Laetitia. Thanks, Francis. And that's what happened. And now in the Amazon Synod, they were proposing very strongly bringing married men to the priesthood. Basically, this as a camouflage to completely destroy the celibacy of the priesthood. And of course, they were asking even for deaconesses, which, as the Council of Nicaea, the first ecumenical council of the Catholic Church, declared, deaconesses are never ordained, no hands are placed upon them, and they are to be considered in all respects as laity. So they're not part of the clergy in any way, shape, or form. And then he gives a quote of Cardinal Daniel saying, well, the Pope needs an advisory council. And that's exactly what Francis did, put the Council of Cardinals to help him, even though the function of all cardinals is to help the Pope, not just a selected few. Okay, skip some here. Let's see what else is kind of. All right, so the See of Peter is vacant. And they have a quote of Cardinal Martini saying, the church, and again, Francis very highly praised Martini from Milan, I believe. And this cardinal said, the church is behind 200 years. So he wants to overhaul the whole church. And that's what Francis is doing, unfortunately. I'm going to skip that about the meetings, among cardinals trying to get Bergoglio elected, the British Embassy and various apartments of various cardinals. Even though other bishops were trying to get other cardinals are trying to get other candidates elected. So, but and now this is the key. Now they had these general meetings, so the various cardinals, said a little speech here and there, 2-minute, 3-minute, 4-minute speech, and according to this book, again here it is. According to this book, some cardinals were not still sure what kind of pope we're going to get, what candidate. There was still division on several possible candidates. And it says, according to this book, when Jorge Mario Bergoglio said this little speech, and of course it's praise to high heaven here, of course, because he's his friend, this changed the minds of a lot of cardinals, and this was the catalyst for getting Jorge Bergoglio elected as Francis. So he says it was the turning point. And he gives actually the full text of the speech which Jorge Bergoglio made. And in it, it has several good things and bad things. But one of the things he always says, oh, you know, we got to do evangelization, which is, again, code words. You got to understand what Francis means by evangelization. He says the church is called to go out from herself and to go to the peripheries, as we hear him all the time. What do you mean go out from herself? The church does not go out from herself. The church goes and teaches the people to bring them into herself, into the one kingdom of Christ. It doesn't go out from herself. And in the same speech, he compares the church. He says, when the church does not go out from herself to evangelize, she becomes self-referential and then gets sick. So the church gets sick if she doesn't go out from herself. And he compares her to the woman in the gospel. You read it yourself in Luke chapter 13, verses 10 to 17. So he compares this woman to the church, to this woman who was in sin and sick and bent over. How can you compare the bride of Christ to such a person? I'm not going to dwell on it because I can. The self-reverential church seeks to keep Jesus Christ within herself and does not let him out. Again, what do you mean by that? And he's quoting here Austin Ivory, one of the Francis propagandists on Twitter. He wrote a book, of course, on Francis the Great Reformer. It should be called The Destroyer, Francis the Destroyer. Austin Ivory later wrote, Bergoglio was once in a generation combination of two qualities seldom found together. He was the political genius of a charismatic leader. He had the political genius of a charismatic leader and the prophetic holiness of a desert saint. Wow. Aren't we lucky to have such a man in the chair of Peter, sharing it with the Pope Emeritus? But then, it says Bergoglio didn't, contrary to most other cardinals, and some cardinals like Bergoglio, Tagle, and Ravasi didn't want to celebrate masses in their titular churches, but, did it privately or something. Again, they always have to do something different. And here it has a quote as well from Cardinal Schönborn from Austria, the guy who has homosexuals having parades in his church in Vienna, and wears he used to be a conservative, apparently. He helped write the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and now he's just a plain evil man. And he says, they're quoting Cardinal Schönborn, but he was like all these monarchs within the bosom of the church, hiding, pretending to obey, pretending to hold on to the doctrine. As soon as they were let loose to allow to express themselves, their truth comes forth. He says, the renewal of the church has started with the resignation of Benedict XVI. So as soon as Benedict XVI, that is when the renewal of the church started. All right, let's go ahead. Congregation. And he tells about all the cardinals, they all agree that the next pope should be a Saint Francis type person with love for the poor. He should possess a sense of humor and have a religious outlook that rejects the them versus us mentality. So they want somebody who rejects the them versus us mentality. Even though Jesus Christ has said, if you're not with me, you're against me. That's a us versus them mentality. He who does not plant with me scatters. Us versus them mentality. Um, he says Cardinal Bergoglio knew nothing about the meetings in Cardinal Nicora's apartment or the earlier meetings at the English and American colleges and the British embassy mentioned in this book. So all these gatherings, these conclave, these little mini conspiracies to get him elected, he apparently had no idea about them. And then he quotes Cardinal Murphy O'Connor saying, the key to getting the key was getting the Asians and Africans to support Bergoglio to get him elected. Part 3, the Conclave. Here we go. The Conclave, Part 3. Oh yeah, they have the code that while they were before the conclave, they were celebrating mass. All the cardinals concelebrated the solemn sung Latin mass. Of course, the fake rite of Paul VI in Latin. He says, thunder sounded several times during mass as the storm raged outside, bringing in heavy rain. The Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI followed the celebration from the papal residence. That's Castel Gandolfo. So storms raged, thunder raged, while they were celebrating Mass to go and elect a new Pope. And remember, the day, and that's, look at the extraordinary coincidence that the day Benedict resigns, lightning strikes St. Peter's Basilica twice. The day they're going to elect his successor, storms and thunder rage. Thunder several times, and storms raged outside, bringing in heavy rain. Wasn't God telling you something there? Or you can't read the signs of the times. Anyways. Again, look at the little annoying things. This Cardinal, now they entered the Sistine Chapel, and the cardinals sat where they're supposed to be sitting. Cardinal Bergoglio took, so now they're looking at the fresco of the Last Judgment. The Cardinal Bergoglio took his place, his seat, at the top of the back row on the left-hand side of the chapel. As he looked at the scene of the Last Judgment, he could see that he was sitting on the side of the just. So Jorge Bergoglio was sitting on the side of the just. He's the saint which we have been awaiting for. And now they have the counting of the ballots. And he brings that up because he says, because Antonio Socci disputes the method of counting and claims that this invalidates the election of Francis. So not only is Benedict's resignation doubtful, but even the election of Francis is doubtful. And anyways, he says here, because another scrutiny, so the cardinal electors wrote the name of whoever they're voting for and put it on a plate. Then they pour it into an urn, and then one of the scrutineers counts how many ballots there are, and then takes them and puts them in another urn, and then they open them up and count them and read the names, and not out loud, but they add them up. Anyway, so it says, then another scrutineer began to count them, taking each ballot from the separated each ballot form separately from the first urn and transfers it to the second, exactly like the first that was empty. Oh, the urn itself looks exactly like the first urn. So from one urn, it says 1, 2, and so forth. The Constitution declares that if that number of ballot sheets cast does not correspond exactly to the number of electors present, then the ballot is declared null and void. And this is supposedly from number 68 from the Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Graecis. but that's not 100% accurate, as we will see, because we're going to get back to it. So actually they give us the voting tallies. So they have the voting tallies because, again, cardinals were contravening the dictates of the Constitution and actually taking notes and recording how many cardinals got what votes. So first vote, that was the first day of the conclave, March 12th. Scola gets 60, Bergoglio gets 26, Ulay gets 22, O'Malley 10, Shearer 4. So, and then they burned them, no pope, first day over, they go home. Now, second day they come, and they go through the process. Well, Bergoglio elected Pope Cardinal. So, so now they do the second vote. So the second vote, but the first of the second day. So the first vote of the second day. Again, they go through the process. Results are now Bergoglio's up. Bergoglio gets 45, Scola 38, Ulay 24, O'Malley 3. And other cardinals get, 1 and 2 and so forth. And now, nothing happened. So now the Constitution requires 2 votes in the morning, then you take a break, go home, do whatever, and come back in the afternoon for a maximum of 2 more votes. The Constitution states there's if the vote is taken the first day, then it's only 1 vote in the afternoon. Then the next day, 2 in the morning. If nobody's out in the first vote, then just 2 in the morning and then 2 in the afternoon. And that's it. Only four ballots per day is allowed. Anything above that would invalidate the election. Any deviation from what the Constitution states would invalidate the election. So anyways, so the third vote, and now the first in the afternoon. So that will be the third vote of the day, right? Or is it the second vote here? Let me just give me 1 second here. The vote began. 115 cardinals. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you're right. So anyway, so this is the second time. So the third vote. So this is the third vote, meaning, this is the 2nd of the morning. The 2nd of the morning. But anyways, they do the checking, do everything. Okay, 115 ballots, let's count. So there was 115 cardinals. So Bergoglio now increases his lead again, gets 56. Scola, just a couple more, gets 41. Ulay gets 14. So, and now they go for, so that's the third vote, the 2nd of the day. Now they go for their break, and they come back for the afternoon. So again, I guess there were people, cardinals were saying, oh, Bergoglio has only 1 lung, so these rumors were spreading. So he says here, these evil other cardinals, they began to move, to stop the plan of God that was about to be realized. And then he says, the Holy Spirit, in spite of the obstacles of the clique, was breathing on the right person. So shows you the divine choice of Jorge Bergoglio. So, and before we get to the last couple of votes, he says here, in the conclave of 2000, in contrast to the 2005 conclave, when there was strong resistance to the election of Ratzinger, again by the St. Gallen Mafia, and Bergoglio came in 2nd in this contest. In this case, several electors confirmed to me that after the conclave there is in fact a little opposition to Bergoglio's election. An elector who participated in both conclaves put it this way: last time, a hard core never accepted Ratzinger and fought against him. This time around, it was not like that. So they never accepted Ratzinger and fought against him. So they fought against Pope Benedict. Even Martini threatened him. Read Dr. Taylor Marshall's book Infiltration, which I have a review on in 2 sections. The video got cut off, so I reviewed it in 2 sections. So anyways, they go through the process. Now this is the first vote in the afternoon, the 3rd vote of the day, the 4th vote of the conclave. Bergoglio increases his lead, so he was on his way to winning anyways. He gets 67 votes, Scola 32 drops, Ulay gets 13, Valini 2, O'Malley 1. And now here we get to the problem, and I'll show you what I have here. So these are what you see here are the numbers of the Constitution, 63, 68, so forth. So this is what Antonio Sochi, I haven't read his book, unfortunately it's not available in English. It's called It Is Not Francis. I'd love somebody to translate it so I can read it. Anyway, so he says, the cardinals proceeded to cast their 5th vote, which is the 4th of the day. The 4th of the day, that's it. That's what the Constitution allows. 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and that's it. Nobody's elected, you come in next day and vote again. So this is now the 5th vote of the whole conclave, the 4th and last of the day. So what happens? So something totally unexpected happened next that would delay the final result. The scrutineers, so the people scrutinizing the vote, the scrutineers counted the number of ballot sheets cast and discovered, to their surprise, that there were 116, one more than the number of electors present. There should be only 115. This happened because the cardinals were given more than 2 ballot sheets each, and each cardinal cast 1 vote. And one cardinal cast his vote without noticing that 2 of his ballot sheets were stuck together. The 5th vote was therefore, now that's his explanation, he says, the 5th vote was therefore declared null and void. So the 5th vote was declared null and void, and without any of the names on the ballot sheets being read, a second vote was taken immediately. This is in full compliance with the number 28, actually it's 68, it's a misprint, it's number 68 of the Apostolic Constitution Universi Dominici Gregis, promulgated by John Paul II, which states, if the number of ballots does not correspond to the number of electors, the ballots must be burned and a second vote taken at once. That is true. So, but it does not say that the vote becomes null and void. It just simply says that a second vote. So I'm going to read you what it actually says here. If the number of ballots does not correspond to the number of electors, the ballots must be burned and a second vote taken at once. So, and that's what it says. But does this second vote mean technically it's a second ballot? So we're not going to go through the process of reading the names. We're just going to burn it and do it again. Well, that makes it 4 times, doesn't it? It's a dubia. It's a question. And then there is actually, in case this is skipped over, like if it was 116 there, but the scrutineers didn't notice and they counted 115. Now the time is to open up the ballots and read the names. And in that process, if it says here, and that's number 69 in the Constitution, if, however, if somebody opens up and they notice actually one elector had 2 pieces of paper, so on it, instead of, again, so one cardinal put 2 pieces instead of 1. If this will still be counted as 1 vote. It says, if, however, they bear 2 different names, neither vote will be valid. So if they have the same name on both pieces of paper, the vote is valid. One has a name, one doesn't. The name named is the valid one. If they have 2 different names, this vote will be invalid. However, in neither of the 2 cases is the voting session annulled. So in neither of these 2 cases is the voting session annulled. So the vote has to be counted if it was being counted while they were reading the names. So previously, according to this, again, if it's true, that they before the counting happened, they counted an extra ballot, so they burnt it and took another vote. The Constitution says take a second vote. Now the question is, does the second vote count as the fourth time? Or it doesn't. It doesn't say it becomes a null and void. It just says burn it and count it, do another vote, a second vote. So that is the question here. And basically in number 76, it says, should the election take place in a way other than the one prescribed in the present Constitution, or should the conditions laid down here not be observed, the election is for this very reason null and void, without any need for a declaration on the matter. Consequently, it confers no right on the one elected. So even if you're elected, it confers no rights on you, so you're not really elected. So this is the dubia, the question. Yeah, they voted actually a 6, so Bergoglio got elected on the 5th vote of the day on the 6th ballot, because one of the ballots was simply burned without the names being read. So does this violate the Constitution? That's another thing. I don't know. So I'm not going to go into that debate. And in the book it says, result of the 6th vote, which would be illegal, I don't know, were the following: Bergoglio 85, Scola 2, 20, Ule 8, Valini 2, and bam, Jorge Bergoglio becomes Pope Francis. And then the cardinals, and this is very kind of funny and sad and enlightening at the same time. So when the cardinals were leaving the Sistine Chapel, it says, not everyone was happy. Cardinal Rodet, for example, later on, turned to Cardinal Levada, who was near to him, and commented, "This is going to be a disaster. This is going to be a disaster. A prophet amongst us." And he talks about Jorge refusing to put the Mosetta on, which confers authority. It's a symbol of authority when he came out on the balcony. And he put, I remember, the stole just for a few seconds, just to bless and remove it, get rid of the stole off of me. I want to look humble and like a normal person. And, you know, he wears his sheer see-through white cassock, so you can see his black pants underneath, you know, showing off his nice his legs. And, of course, he keeps his black shoe to look, you know, all humble. And he says here, in page 237, the cardinals immediately noted that he, Jorge Francis, referred to himself as bishop, not pope or Roman pontiff. The leaders of other Christian churches and communities also took note of this. And I remember the first year or two, Francis would refuse to call himself pope. He didn't want to be called pope. He would call himself, I'm the Bishop of Rome. Don't call me pope. I guess because the real pope was still in the Vatican somewhere else. Anyways, part 4, early signs of a new papacy. So March 14th to the present. So they have again, they're quoting, as I said, it says, it quotes different newspapers and articles and reporters. So a newspaper from the people who should know best, Argentina. So in Argentina, in Pagina 12, Pagina 12, paper says, which has often attacked Cardinal Bergoglio when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, screamed, "Dios mío, my God, Dios mío, my God, Jorge became Pope. Oh my God, it's gonna be a disaster." All right, let's see here. Again, some quotes from Jorge. He says, the Holy Spirit, he's talking to the cardinals. Like, you know, it goes to Santa Marta. because he wants to be close to the cardinals, and of course he hates those who wants ask him questions, like the dubia cardinals. So he goes to Santa Marta and he says, look, the action of the Holy Spirit, that same Spirit, he remarked, creates all the differences among the churches, almost as it were an apostle of Babel. So the Holy Spirit creates all the difference among the churches, like an apostle of Babel. Babel, God made the differences in Babel because it's the cursing of the confusion of the languages of the peoples as a punishment. So yeah, God did cause that as a punishment. It wasn't as a good thing, and it creates all the differences. But he creates unity from these differences, not inequality, but in harmony. Yeah, in a sense, yes, but don't call that the Holy Spirit is the author of confusion, basically. God did confuse the tongues as a punishment, not as a good. And then he talks still talking to the cardinals. He says, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, truly present in the church and also in every person. So Jesus Christ is present in every person. No, he is not present in every person. So these are some of the quotes of Jorge, the humble Bergoglio. Again, he's talking now again. He's talking after he got elected. He has a meeting with the reporters. He's talking to the reporters. Let's see here. So he's talking to the reporters, tells them, thanking them again for their hard work. He asked them to try to understand more fully the true nature of the church, as well as her journey in this world, with her virtues and her sins. The church's sins. The church is the Immaculate Bride of Christ. She has no sins. Members of the church sin, but the church is holy. But he says the church's sins to secular reporters. Again, when he was blessing the reporters, here it says here, again he says, he broke yet again with tradition. What did Jorge do this time? And out of respect, because he's so respectful, out of respect, being a traitor of Jesus Christ, but out of respect for the many reporters present who were not Christians, he did not impart his blessing as his predecessors has done. And he says, look, I cordially give you this blessing silently to each of you, respecting the conscience of each, but in the knowledge that each of you is a child of God. May God bless you. So he refused to bless them because some are not Christians. A reporter from Al Jazeera television, a Muslim wearing a headscarf, said, I just love your new Pope. He respects us. She said she was really taken by his concern for the poor and how he had not imposed his blessing on non-Christians. That is the Pope we have. The Pope, the bishop dressed in white as the vision, who seems to be the Pope as the vision of Fatima states. And then the other thing, March 18th, that when they gave him the coat of arms, it says here, the coat of arms of Pope Francis that shows that basically it will remain unchanged, the same as he had when he first became the auxiliary bishop of Buenos Aires in 1992. This is quite unusual. And that's not the only thing which is quite unusual. And then again, when he was elected, and it was always the Pope was coronated because he is representing the king. And then, of course, Paul VI, the destroyer of the Roman Reich, changes, of course, everything, including that. And but at least to the rite of coronation. But then John Paul I, John Paul II, John Paul I gets the ceremony is for the it's called the ceremony, the mass for the beginning of the supreme pontiff, John Paul II, of the pontificate, Benedict XVI, same thing, supreme pontiff, pontificate, and so forth. Significantly, however, Francis decided that today's ceremony would be officially known as the start of the Petrine ministry of the Bishop of Rome. Doesn't want to be called Pope. He doesn't want to stay at the papal apartments. In his my video on proselytism versus evangelization of Pope Francis, he's talking to the Jesuits from Mozambique or something, and he tells them, when I entered the papal apartments, I heard something within me. I heard a voice telling me, you don't belong here. You have to not stay here. Again, is it a sign from God? Anyways, and he concludes his book by saying, I'm going to read his conclusion here. Since then, many others have written about the new style of papacy that has taken shape under Francis. One marked by collegiality, unless of course you disagree with him, and synodality, again, unless you disagree with him. So there is no need for me to add more here, except to say that the reshaping of the papacy is still a work in progress. It's still not good enough. When he says, there is, of course, much more that I know, but cannot put into the public domain out of respect for the cardinals and bishops who gave him the information. And that's it. And this is written by Gerard O'Connell. Here is his picture. So, this is the election of Pope Francis, the inside account of the conclave that changed history. Pretty good read, a lot of good information in it. You just have to go stomach the talk about Francis being like the new Saint Francis, the saint on earth, the reformer, the desert father, the charismatic leader, the humble one who asked for people to pray for him, who is so humble that he refuses to bless non-Christians. If you can stomach all of that, it has a lot of good information, a lot of facts, and a lot of questions, again, which need to be answered. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, and share. That's it. That's all. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.